Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of CN Unit Analysis, we are going to be going through our most popular internet waifu in Honkai Starbucks, Firefly. So without further ado, let's get into today's content. Subscribe! So first things first for Firefly, as well as all future CN unit analysis, you can see that we are going to be undergoing a little bit of a format change as well. The goal of this is going to be bring different perspectives from the CN community, but you will notice that for the basic kit, namely the skill, summary of the tracers, ultimate technique, it's going to be a lot more condensed because we do have the creator experience program that pretty much talks about our kit in depth before this video. So I'm just going to be briefly going through them, but what I want to focus on is specifically like the calculations and how effective you can make use of a kit, such as what can you do with the knowledge of her kit, right? So her relics, Lightcones, Eidolons, all the calculations, as well as some tips and tricks, speed thresholds, all that is going to be quite important for us. For the relics, Lightcones, Eidolons, keep in mind that all of the calculations shown over here, it is going to be done in a theory crafted scenario, which means you do want to take this with a massive grain of salt, because at the end of the day, a practical scenarios will always be differing from our theoretical scenarios, right? Because theory can only go so far. But that being said, it is going to be serving as a good benchmark process on which relics do we use, which teams do we use, and which Lightcones do we use, right? So it's still a pretty good measure for players to roughly understand what is her potential, right? But do take it with a grain of salt. And then lastly, our target audience is going to be for pretty much any players, right? Free to plays, whales, whatever you want, because anybody and anyone that wants to optimize and improve their unit, Firefly, team comps, then you're going to be coming to the right place. So for a basic as well as enhanced basic attack for 99.99% of the time, you are not going to be using them because enhanced skill will inherently deal more damage since it does have 3 targets, as well as the fact that you deal more toughness bar, which will scale better with your super break, right? So you're probably never going to be using this basic unless you run into skill point issues. Then jumping into the skill, the basic skill is going to be recovering 60% of Firefly's max energy, as well as applying single target damage. 60% of max energy is quite important here because Firefly does have 240 max energy for her ultimate to begin, right? So without the skill, it's going to take very long for Firefly, which means that inherently Firefly will always hit a 2-turn ultimate no matter what kind of situations you run. Sometimes as well, in fact most of the time, you are going to be able to achieve a 1-turn ultimate, assuming that you land enough kills or get enough hits or the kind of stuff, right? But most of the time, this is going to be no issues whatsoever. You do not need to run any form of energy regeneration rope, okay? Then for her enhanced skill, which is after you cast Firefly's ultimate, it's going to be a 3 target damage and applies 5 winners to the main target. It also has a slight scaling break, but that being said, it is still very miserable because most of the time you're not going to be critting with Firefly. So unless the target is going to be weakness broken by that hit, or the target is already weakness broken, Firefly will do absolutely 0 damage whatsoever. So do not expect something to come out of this unless the target is weakness broken. Then for Firefly's ultimate, is going to be jumping into a combustion state, right? 100% action value advance brings her a 60 speed buff, as well as 50% break efficiency on top of 20% break damage taken, which is the same as vulnerability, and it will end after 142 action value because this kernel, you can see at the little corner over there, is going to be having a fixed 70 speed, right? Something like a Jingyuan Topaz, like a summon, and after 142 action value, then this is going to expire. And yes, this does refresh per wave, per cycle, in Memory of Chaos, in Pure Vision, all that kind of stuff, right? So that's going to be really good. And then for her talent, it's going to be 30 effect rest and 40% damage taken reduction, as well as the fact that this will be a max value when you're into ultimate, right? So she is inherently much tankier than other DPSs, especially other destruction DPS such as Jingliu and Inhibitor Domain, and to a certain extent even Blade, because although Blade does give HP, he also consumes a lot of HP, so you might encounter situations that Blade will die, especially without a sustain. So for Firefly itself, because she has built-in sustain on top of 30 effect rest to reduce her crowd control, as well as 40% damage taken reduction, it is not that bad to run Firefly on a sustainless comp. So if you do want to run Gallagher, you want to run like a Bronya or whatever, this can work quite well, right? So that's going to be that. And then her technique is going to be dealing some damage to all targets, but the main thing is going to be applying fire weakness to every single target on every single wave lasting 2 turns. So this is the bread and butter for Firefly, which you are always going to be against the target with fire weakness due to this technique. So it is almost impossible for a player to not start a battle with Firefly's technique. Keep in mind, this does last for 2 turns. If you are up against an enemy with a very high health and the effect does expire, keep in mind that our enhanced skill also marks fire weakness on our main target, right? So you don't really have to worry that if you are against a lead or a boss, the fire weakness runs out, because you can still apply it with your enhanced skill. And then for Firefly's major tracers, first of all, reduce 55% toughness to any target even without fire weakness, so it is going to be quite beneficial for us to give the mobs as well as the adjacent targets. Another one is 360% break effect will give you an additional 50% super break damage. I'm only concerned about 360% because that is the benchmark that players should try to achieve with Firefly. And although this number does seem to be like, you know, oh my god, it's such a high number, right? In battle, so you don't have to hit 360% before the battle begins in your character screen. So when you enter the battle, we have Harmony Trailblazer, we have Run Mei, all of the break effect will add on, so it can be quite easily obtainable when you are in battle with Firefly to hit the 360% full benefits, right? So that's going to be there. And then lastly, for every 10 attack beyond 1800, you do get 0.8% break effect, and this does not have a cap. So for every single 10 point of attack, you will get 0.8% break effect. No cap, which is why 4 of Aeon is just such a great Lightcone, but we're going to talk about that later on. And then finally, her minor traces is going to be 5 speed, 37.3% break effect, as well as 18 effect rest. So she does have an inherent 48% effect rest, which makes her a little bit less susceptible to crowd controls such as Imprison, Weaken, and all that kind of stuff, right? So that is going to be our Firefly's basic kit. But before we continue on to all the calculations, what can we do with the information at hand with regards to, for example, speed tuning as well as winner's break, all that kind of stuff? So jumping into the next portion, which is going to be the notes from the basic kit, right? First and most important thing, you do not build Firefly as a crit DPS or even a crit/break hybrid DPS, because it is a complete waste of a break damage potential from a super break, as well as all of the winner's break efficiency, all the kind of stuff, right? And the break damage taken. Maybe if we can crit with our breaks one day, then that might be possible. But for now, because breaks itself, super break, break damage, they all cannot crit, there's a complete waste of subsets and main sets, because at the end of the day, you have opportunity costs, right? For every subset and main set you go into crit rate or crit damage, it is gonna be a subset away from break effect, attack percentage, and speed, right? So because of opportunity cost, it is not ideal for players to run her on a crit or hybrid build, right? So that's gonna be that. Number 2, she does have 240 energy for ultimate, but you're almost going to be at 100% ultimate uptime with all of the hits and kills plus our skill usage. I'm going to be jumping into exactly how many kills and hits you need, but essentially, despite a very, very high ultimate cost, you are minimum going to be achieving a 2-turn ultimate, and most of the time, if you're killing enemies as well as getting hit because she is the destruction target, you can maintain a 1-turn ultimate with Firefly, so something to keep in mind. And then the third point, which is probably I'm going to spend a little bit more time over here, is going to be the speed tuning. This is going to be the most important kit of what Firefly has to offer, disregarding the break portion. Speed tuning, especially with regards to the ultimate. TLDR, if you're not going to reorder it after all the calculations, you need 164.34 speed with Firefly in order to act 4 times in the first wave. With Run Mei, this speed requirement goes down to 153.94, as you can see over here, because of Run Mei's 10% speed buff, right? So how exactly does this work? So as you guys know, the kernel itself, it has a base speed of 70. So after 142 action value, it will expire. Which means in order for Firefly to go 3 times within this duration of the ultimate, she will need 164.34 speed. Now this is gonna be for Memory of Chaos. The reason why it's not 150 speed on top, which might be the speed that you guys might be recommended, is because this does not take into account that in Memory of Chaos, the first wave, there is 150 action value for the first wave, right? Under any other circumstances, like for example in a Pokke Shadow kind of stuff, then you don't really need to care about this because there are no waves per se in Memory of Chaos, right? So in normal circumstances, you need 150 speed without Run Mei and 139.6 speed with Run Mei. For Memory of Chaos, you're gonna need 164.34 or 153.94 with Run Mei. With Run Mei, you're probably gonna take this as the benchmark for almost every single application because you are gonna be running Firefly with Run Mei every single time if you have Run Mei, right? So that's pretty much it. And then for the last example over here, it's gonna be 121 speed running Firefly with attack percentage boots. Now this scenario is very, very niche and you're probably never gonna use it because you do need Run Mei as well as your Harmony MC to be running double Von Weg and double Duns for all of the action very advanced to push up Firefly and go 4 times during her turn, right? So 99.9% of the time, you're not going to be doing this. It is just much easier, much better to just run Firefly with speed boots, and consider the fact that attack percentage, it does have opportunities called diminishing returns, because if you run attack boots, you're still going to get a lot of attack percentage sources from her body as well as the sphere. So really not that recommended, right? So TLDR for Memory of Chaos as well as which pretty much like our only relevant endgame content right now, you are going to need 164.34 or 153.94 speed, as you can see over here, right? The fundamental principle, if you care about it that much, is that you need 225 speed effectively, because usually you only need 200 speed to go 3 times on the first wave, but because our very first action with Firefly before we start enhanced skill, she does not have the 60 speed buff from the ultimate, which is why you need 225 speed to kind of compensate for this lack of speed, right? You didn't start the battle off with Firefly's 60 speed buff. You only started after the first skill cast. Right, so that is basically the rationale behind this. You can adjust it with dozens, you can adjust it with any other light codes, but this is going to be the general gist of how speed tuning works with Firefly. TLDR, use her with run mate, get 154 speed, call your day for Memory of Chaos, right? So that is going to be the simplest portion. For those of you guys who are a little bit more interested, you can kind of look at this yourself. I think my editor can kind of translate this, right? And then one last thing before we move on from Firefly's notes on a basic kit is going to be the fact that she has a very, very big problem against targets that have toughness lock. Specifically, units like Sam or even the Trotters. What I mean by toughness lock is you cannot deal any toughness bar damage to them, even if they have fire weakness. So this is gonna be a big damage drop off for Firefly. So if in the future we are up against more enemies that have this toughness lock feature, then you probably want to use Firefly on the other half, because Firefly will do absolutely 0 damage against the target without weakness breaking, right? So that's going to be very, very bad for her. Now the weakness break efficiency, all that is going to be completely out of the window. So TLDR, do not run Firefly against enemies that have toughness lock mechanic, right? So that is going to be that. Jumping into the light cone portion before we jump in all the calculations. This is going to be all the calculations. So the light cone portion, although break does not scale with attack naturally, Firefly has attack percentage to break percentage conversion traits, right? As I mentioned before, for every 10 attack, you get 0.8% break effect. But generally speaking, attack percentage by itself is a useless stat for break damage dealers. Firefly is the only exception. So if you're thinking of using like 4 of an Aeon as a substitute for units like any units that does not have this conversion, then do not do that, right? Do not do that. 4 of an Aeon S5 because is going to be Firefly's best alternative aside from the signature light cone, right? It is gonna be dealing a roughly 86.21% damage compared to the signature light cone one, as you can see over here, because of its very, very high attack percentage, not only from the passive from the light cone as well as the raw flat attack you're going to be getting from the Lightcones itself is very, very high, right? So really good substitute. But keep in mind that the 4 of the Aeons damage percentage, right, when you break the target, that's going to be completely useless on Firefly because damage percentage does not scale with break damage. And before we continue, I just want to remind everyone one more time, the only things that break damage scales with is going to be your break effect as well as your levels. That's going to be the only stats that break damage scales with. For super break, it will scale with your toughness bar, your break efficiency, right? So that is the only addition. Damage percentage, crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage naturally, they will not improve your break damage at all, right? Firefly is an exception because she converts attack percentage to break damage. Aside from this buffs, debuffs do work with break. So defense down, res down, vulnerability, all these things work with break damage. But aside from this, those are the things that matter when it comes to break damage skin, right? So that's gonna be that. And then Clara Signature Lightcone 1, Imbibitor Lunae Signature Lightcone 1, and Jingliu Signature 1, they all have their own limitations. Specifically, I'm gonna be jumping on this over here real quick. Give me 1 second. Alright. So this is going to be the comparison for Imbibitor Lunae Signature Lightcone as well as Jingliu Signature Lightcone. So you can see over here, Imbibitor Lunae Signature Lightcone at S1 is only 80.1%, which is really, really bad for Firefly compared to even 4 of an Aeon, right? And keep in mind, Imbibitor Lunae's buff is only triggered with basic attacks. And for Firefly, you are almost never going to be using basic attacks in the first place, right? And energy regeneration is completely useless on Firefly as well because we're naturally going to be getting on 2-turn ultimate for sure, and most of the time we are probably going to be getting a 1-turn ultimate. So Invisible Lightcone is not that great of a substitute. Then jumping into Ting Liu's Ninja Lightcone, you can see that it is not too bad. 83.99%, assuming you get the full defense reduction stacking. But if you do not get the full defense reduction stacking, then it's going to fall to 78.29%. And this is even with defense reduction, right? And it is still at a lower percentage compared to the fall of an Aeon S5. That being said though, because of the way defense reduction work, if you do have E1 Rame or any sort of additional defense reduction sources, then this Ting Liu Lightcone probably might see a higher percentage, but that's assuming that you do trigger the conditions for the defense reduction for Ting Liu Lightcone. If you can't trigger it, then it's just really, really bad substitute, right? Misha's Lightcone, the 4-star, is honestly not too bad, but it is basically like the next best alternative if you don't have 4th and S5, which why would you not have 4th and S5? Because it's literally free. At S5, it's gonna be at 82.76%, and the reason why it is so low is because Misha's Lightcone, this 4-star Lightcone, it inherently has low attack, because it's a 4-star Lightcone. So the base stats for the attack, it drops off quite a bit, and because Firefly can benefit quite a lot from the attack to break conversion, that's why the final value here is still going to be lower than 4th and Aeon S5, right? So that's going to be that for our Lightcone section. All these are just other additional, right? This is going to be the most welcome you as well as under the blue sky. This S5 is going to be 79.29%, and S5 over the most welcome is going to be at 81.6%, right? So TLDR, everybody should just be running 4th and on S5. No questions asked, because everybody should be getting this Lightcone. It is completely free in Hurdle Up, right? So that's going to be that for our Lightcone portion. Then jumping on into our Relics portion. Honestly, very, very straightforward. Use the new 4-piece as well as the new 2-piece. They are both best in slot. It's like MiHoYo tailor-made them to Firefly. Best in slot, no questions asked. You're definitely going to be benefiting for this. If you're not going to be farming the new 4+2, you can still stick with our old 4-piece Thief set with our Talia set, right? The Thief set energy, it can help out a little bit to maintain a 1-turn ultimate, but other than that, nothing too crazy. Whatever set with the break effect, that's gonna be good, right? So that's gonna be that. Then for our main set, it's gonna be attack percentage body, attack percentage sphere, break effect rope, as well as speed boots, right? So very, very straightforward main stats. The reason why you want to run speed boots instead of attack boots, I've mentioned this over previously, right? If you want to run attack boots, you could go for this low speed setup, very difficult to pull off, and oftentimes it's just not worth the hassle, right? You're just better off running speed boots. So that's gonna be that. And then for our substat, it's gonna be aiming for break effect percentage as well as attack percentage from our substats to gain even more break effect scaling. But you do want to hit your speed threshold first. So assuming that you land this 153.9, okay, just 154 speed. If you do have 154 speed, then you don't have to care about speed subsets any longer. But before you hit 154 speed, then speed is going to be the most important priority, because speed tuning will always translate into the highest amount of damage, right? Because if you're just missing that 1 or 2 speed and you completely miss out one action before the kernel expire, it's gonna be a very warm bomb situation. Like for example, if you only had like 150 speed, then you're gonna completely waste that one action in the ultimate form, which is a very, very big damage drop off. So speed tuning is the #1 priority for Firefly. Only after hitting 154 speed, then can you think about getting your attack percentage, your break effect from our substats, right? So that is going to be that. Damage percentage, completely useless. You don't have to care about fire damage sphere. Just completely useless. Don't even care about it at all. Speed boost will always be recommended, like I mentioned just now, as well as the fact that break subsets are more valuable than attack since it scales better. Because keep in mind, it is 10 attack to 0.8% break effect. So more often than not, you're just better off running a direct break effect substat. Attack percentage is a decent consolation price, but for the most part, you do want to focus on break effect because it does ultimately scale better, right? Okay. And jumping into our Eidolon portion, the editor, you can just kind of zoom this part over in. Our E1 scales extremely well with defense down sources. So you can see over here, 15% defense down, their actual damage output. So from 0 to 15%, it's going to be an 8.72%. But if you already have, like for example, our 4-piece super break, so 25% defense is not with a super break, then there is going to be an additional 10.21% because, like I mentioned a lot of times, defense break scaling is additive. The more defense break sources you have, the more effective this is going to be. So if you add this on with Run Maze, 20% defense down, this is going to be 60% defense down to be an even higher scaling, right? So defense down, always very, very good. And the additional free skill point, you don't even need to use skill point when you use enhanced skill. It's gonna be very, very comfy when we're gonna be using her with Harmony Trailblazer, because if you want to perform super break damage with Harmony Trailblazer, you do want to use Harmony Trailblazer skill, right? So it can translate into more overall team damage because you are more liberal with your skill points. So overall, a very, very comfortable, very, very good Eidolon 1. Eidolon 2 is pretty much like in Biblical Donate. I'm sure you guys have seen from my creator experience program. It basically allows her to get an extra turn every other turn, right? So you are almost always going to be triggering this with Firefly because you have ridiculous kill potential as well as break potential when you enter into the enhanced combustion state, right, during the ultimate, which also goes to show even more how important speed tuning is for Firefly. You really, really want to hit that 154 speed because that will give you one additional action during the ultimate. The ability to hit or not hit 154 speed with Run Maze, of course, is that one additional action. So if you're going to be running an E2 Firefly, this will compound the effects even further because that will be your third action during ultimate, which means you can get an extra turn from the E2. If you do not have this third action, you are not going to be able to get this additional turn because this E2 effect only triggers every other turn, right? So very, very important to hit the speed threshold. Even that being said, even if you don't hit the speed threshold, E2 Firefly is completely busted. You can see from the video over there. Just breaking ridiculous amount of damage, doing ridiculous amount of damage, doing a lot of amount of damage. Just overall, a great, great comfortable item. E3 to E5, frankly speaking, it is not too good. E5 does add 6 speed to your ultimate, which means instead of going for 153.94 speed with Run Maze, you now only need 147.94, or rather 148 speed with Run Maze because of the additional 6 speed from your E5. But that is the only other important thing for Firefly. So it saves you roughly 2 to 3 speeds, 2.5 speed subsets. So you could allocate a little bit more into Brave or just overall make building Firefly a little bit easier. Right? So just a quality of life. E4, the additional effect rest, frankly speaking, not that crazy, but you do get 98 effect rest in battle. So it does drastically reduce the probability of you getting crowd control. Right? So overall, just a comfort item, nothing too crazy. E6 Eidolon is where it is completely bonkers because it is a 50% break efficiency that's additive. So with your 50% break efficiency from your ultimate, 50% break efficiency from Run Maze, and 50% break efficiency from your E6, you can now break targets at a much more effective pace. I'm not sure if you guys see my previous video where we did the okay, maybe not previous video, but there's this $1 versus $2,000 Firefly video that's going to be coming out. This E6 basically translates to us breaking or not breaking Argenti. Maybe I'll just include a clip over here to show how important this is. And the reason why this is so important is because, like I mentioned at the start of the video just now, Firefly against the target that is not Witness Broken inherently does absolutely 0 damage. You really need a target to be Witness Broken or going to be Witness Broken, right? So it might not seem like too crazy, right? Adding a little bit of break efficiency, but the difference between a broken and a not broken enemy is completely heaven and earth for Firefly. So this 50% break efficiency is a little bit hard to calculate exactly how many percentage this translates to, but the fact that if you can just break the enemy one action earlier, it will deal infinitely more damage because of that one action earlier, right? Also, 20% fire rest translates to a hell of a lot of damage as well. This island portion, I'm gonna save it to you guys to see the $1 versus $2,000 Firefly to see exactly how Firefly's Island affects the kit, right? So that's gonna be that. But TLDR, this E6 is completely game breaking. Really just translates to a complete damage dealer, absolutely insane. But you really don't need this, right? So considering that E6, you still need E3 to F5, it might not be that way for players. If you want a good stopping point, E0, E1, E2, they're all great comfort items. So that's gonna be that for Firefly item. Then before we move on to a team comments, I just want to answer this one question. Do we get Firefly's E1 or S1? So this is gonna be the overall recommendations. You start off at 0+0, and then you get E1 first, because you can use 4 of Aeon, and then you get her E2 before her S1, and then finally after getting an E2, then you can consider getting her S1 if you really want to upgrade, because the E3 to E5 is really just not worth it whatsoever. Right? So TLDR, E1 better than S1, and even E2 is better than S1, right? Because they're both extremely powerful game-changing items. It changes not only the damage, but also our overall energy usage, our skill point usage, our action value rotations, something that can never be replicated by a single Lightcone, right? Our Lightcone is only an increment in damage, but the skill point as well as extra turn is absolutely game-changing, right? The damage increments for Firefly signature Lightcone is also not that important, because what is more important than damage is going to be break efficiency. And Firefly's Lightcone inherently does not change Firefly's break efficiency. So if Firefly's signature Lightcone actually changed break efficiency, then it would be worth it. But because we don't change our break speed, it doesn't matter that much. The thing that's more important than the actual break damage is how fast you break the target. This is way more important for Firefly than the final break damage itself. Breaking faster is always better than breaking bigger, right? So that's gonna be that. And one thing to note before we move on is that inherently Eidolon 1 does cost more than signature Lightcone 1, because you have a higher PD and it's gonna be a 50-50 instead of 75-25, right? So do plan your decision a little bit more carefully. Now, jumping into pretty much our last portion, that's going to be the team building with Firefly. So, like I mentioned just now, the damage output for any break team / super break team is going to be a focus on both break effect and break efficiency, but overall, break efficiency will take a higher priority. The team that can break the fastest, i.e. the more break efficiency, will lead to the highest damage output. It doesn't matter if you have 1 billion break effect, but if you can't break the target fast enough, you will waste that one additional turn, and it will translate to a big damage drop-off because you now need an additional turn to break the target, right? So break efficiency is always the king for all break team comps. Our second point for our team building is that super break, like I mentioned in Harmony Trailblazer CNU analysis, is that it takes into account both break effect as well as break efficiency, right? So for our skills or ultimates, they generally deal more toughness bar damage compared to a basic attack, which is why for Firefly, you're almost always going to be using her enhanced skill against the enemy target, right? So that's why for this factor, just use Firefly skill as much as possible. And now jumping to teammate, because of the both factors involved, because we do skill with both break effect and break efficiency, and how important it is to break the target as fast as humanly possible, run mate is going to be non-negotiable in the Firefly team comp. Not saying that you have to use her, but if you do not have run mate, her damage drop-off will be very evident, as you guys can see from my previous creator experience program if I were to use Firefly with or without run mate, right? Because 50% of run mate, the break efficiency, it is additive with Firefly's ultimate 50% break efficiency, which means we get 100% break efficiency when we use run mate and only 50% without run mate. For comparison, our toughness bar damage with our enhanced skill is going to be 6 on the main target and 3 on the adjacent targets. Boot Hill is 7.5 toughness bar with Rame single target. So that's going to be a comparison. Overall, Boot Hill will probably kill the bosses a lot quicker, but because Firefly, we get an extra turn. But because Firefly is going to be an AoE target, as well as the fact that you can implement fire with so every single wave, no problem whatsoever, is going to be also quite comfortable. For more in-depth video for Boot Hill versus Firefly, which is probably going to trigger quite a bit of drama, stay tuned to our future content. So they're going to be there. Harmony MC's Super Break. This is also non-negotiable because although Firefly, she has a built-in 50% Super Break when you reach 360% break effect, it is very small. So you really want Firefly's Super Break to be put on top of Harmony MC's Super Break as well to deal the highest amount of damage. You can see over here, this is the comparison, right? This is without Harmony MC's ultimate, and this is with Harmony MC's ultimate. You can see the difference here. It is only with or without ultimate. The damage difference is quite literally triple. You quite literally deal more than triple, in fact, no, quadruple of Firefly's damage output with or without Harmony MC's ultimate, right? So this Super Break is extremely important. You really want to run this with Firefly. And then finally, the slot is going to be between Gallagher or Sustain. And finally, for our sustain, it's going to be between Gallagher or Huo Huo. Gallagher is definitely the best slot, but if you don't have Gallagher or you just don't want to raise Gallagher, Huo Huo is honestly a very decent option. And if you don't want to run any sustain, then Bronya is going to be a great pick just to give our Firefly a little bit more additional turns, right? Because additional turn is always very, very good for Firefly. So that's going to be coming to this last portion, and that's going to be our sustain. So for the sustain, Gallagher is our perfect fit because he has very high break effect and break efficiency for himself, especially for his E6. And we also share the fire weakness with Firefly's technique where we implant a fire weakness, right? So you're always going to be on the right element when you're running Gallagher. And like I mentioned, faster break will always result in more damage. So inheriting, I'm not sure if you guys seen some clips of Gallagher's ultimate dealing a ridiculous amount of damage himself because he does have very high break efficiency paired up with how many MCs super break. So this team is just pitch perfect, absolutely nothing much. But if you do not want to run Gallagher, you could opt for Huo Huo, because Huo Huo has a pretty good usage if your Firefly cannot get a one-turn ultimate consistently. So this is going to be the energy gap, right? So after casting a skill, we are going to be needing 91 more energy to get our next turn if we don't want to use our second skill. So without Huo Huo, getting 91 energy means that between getting hit and getting killed, you need to do that like more than 9 times, which can be a little bit difficult. Not impossible. Not impossible. You can definitely still achieve one ultimates, but if you don't run Huo Huo, that's gonna be maybe a little bit problematic. But if you do run Huo Huo, she will regenerate 20% of max energy, which is equivalent to 48 energy. That means you only need 43 more energy to get back a one-turn ultimate. So this is going to be up to the player base, whether you need this additional 48 energy to maintain more or less a permanent ultimate time. Because keep in mind, if you only need 43 energy, you only need to get hit or kills 5 times to get a permanent ultimate uptime. You will not gain energy from our enhanced usage, right? Keep that in mind. You only get it from kills and skills. So that's going to be up to player base. Also, 40% attack buff from Huo Huo is also quite nice since Firefly can translate this into additional break effect, right? So that's going to be that. But overall, you can see over here, the team building for Firefly is very, very rigid. There is not a lot of substitutes for Harmony MC and Ramei unless MiHoYo introduces more break supports in the future. And the closest substitute, if you really don't want to run either of them, is probably going to be Asta or Pella, right? Asta, she has a speed buff. She also has pretty decent break efficiency. You could run like a break effect Asta. Might be possible. Or you can run Pella for the AoE defense down because break damage does scale with defense down, right? For sustain, Gallagher or Huo Huo, that's going to be the choice, right? So, yeah, that is pretty much it. So, in summary, to wrap up everything, the goal for a Firefly team, or rather any break team, is going to break the target as fast as humanly possible and activate our super break to deal ridiculous amounts of damage, right? No damage when there's no break. When there's no break, there's no damage, right? So, you want to break the target as fast as humanly possible. For Relics, you can achieve a fast break with the inclusion of Ramei, with the inclusion of Harmony MC, with the inclusion of Gallagher, just to make us break as fast as possible. Do keep in mind, for Harmony MC, it is only if the target has imaginary weakness. Otherwise, she's not going to be contributing to our break efficiency at all. But if the target is already broken, then Harmony MC can still deal ridiculous amounts of super break damage, right? So overall, still a very, very universal pick for a Firefly team comp. Then our Relics, new 4-piece but 2-piece. Not too much to be said here. If you don't have it, then T plus Talia. That's it. For Lightcone, signature Lightcone 1 is going to be better than all our substitutes, but 4th and Aeon is a very, very good alternative. For Eidolons, E1 and E2, they're both very, very good Eidolons. E3 to E5, not worth it, and E6 changes everything, but is it worth it? That's going to be up to you. Between E1 and S1, you want to focus on E1 first, and then S1. In fact, you want to focus on E2 first before S1 as well, so that's going to be there. And our team comp is going to be Ramei, Harmony MC, pretty much non-negotiable, and then for our sustain, it's going to be either Gallagher or Pokke. But overall, Gallagher, Harmony MC, and Ramei is going to be a non-negotiable team comp. Best in stock, almost every single situation, right? So with that, we have come to the end of today's content. Leave your comments down below if you have any suggestions, or join the Discord, discord.g4. We're very active going to my Honkai on a daily basis when you come and stream. There's Twitter.tv/MrPokke, as well as YouTube.com/MrPokke. I'll show you every day, check out Discord. I did get banned, but by the time you see this video, I'm probably unbanned, so yippee, yep, that's gonna be really, really good. Yeah, so that's all I have for today. All the best for your Firefly pools, all the best for your girlfriend pools, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.